How much would you pay for a toilet set in Guyana? I had the task of looking at this earlier this week. National Hardware charges $30,000 for a toilet set. Gafson's Industries Limited, $33,355. Hampson General Store, $20,500. And then there's Zhongya Hardware, a store owned by Chinese nationals, that charges $15,500 for a toilet set. Well, guess how much the government of Guyana is paying the Chinese for each of 30 toilet sets for the Cheddi Jagan International Airport Expansion Project. Each, I said, $424,212. That is the scandal that is called the Cheddi Jagan International Airport. Let us take the urinal. Again, National Hardware, about 15,000. Gafson's around the same figure. Hampson's around the same figure. What does the urinal cost for at the airport project? $298,000. Take the sink, same kind of thing. It costs sometimes 10 times as much. Now, where do I get these figures from? It is in a contract for the extension of the Cheddi Jagan International Airport, signed by one Mr. Balraj Balram, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Public Works and Communications. This contract is an absolute scandal. Now, this is not to say that we do not need to extend the runway of the Cheddi Jagan International Airport. I sent a copy of the contract and the drawing to a professional in the States, asking him for some comments. The first thing he said, that looks almost like an industrial type airport. It is ugly, and it costs, and we're talking now, we've moved on from toilet sets and urinals and sink and shower. He said the cost is absolutely prohibitive. Now, why would the government of Guyana sign such an agreement? And bear in mind, this contract was November 11th, 2011, 17 days before we were due to have national elections. This government, through the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Works and Communications, signs a $138 million United States dollars contract that is probably inflated in a magnitude of about 60%. Now, can this country really afford it? I hope that professionals in this country, that our parliamentarians who have had this document in their possession for several months will start raising a hue and cry about this abuse of public funds, the manner in which we allow the Chinese not to give us a golden fleece, but in fact to fleece us. We need to take action on this. This contract should not be allowed to go through. It was not done in accordance with the Procurement Act competitive bidding tendering process. It is exorbitant and excessive. It doesn't provide for any independent supervisory agent. The contract is not even complete. And we have paid out already tens of millions of United States dollars on this contract. Someone needs to put a stop to it. I'm Christopher Ram. I'll be back with Plain Talk in a moment. June 13th, which passed a couple of days ago, marked 33 years since the death of Walter Rodney, famous historian, political activist, and associated with the Working People's Alliance. On Plain Talk this evening, I have two of Professor Rodney's colleagues to discuss issues of Walter Rodney, politics, and Guyana. Mr. Desmond Trotman, now a member of Parliament, and Mr. Tacuma Ogunseye, a long-standing member, and indeed, I think, a founder member of the Working People's Alliance. Gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, we often hear it said that the Working People's Alliance is a Rodneyite party. First of all, am I correct in saying that? And what does Rodneyite in this context mean?
I think you're correct in saying it because a number of persons use the term, but I must say that WPA never officially, promote the term. We never officially promote it. In fact, we also know that Rodney, our wife, have communicated to the party and some comrades that Walter himself would have problems with his name being associated and used in that way. I think the problem is that persons really who push the term probably out of trying to keep Walter's ideas politically, intellectually alive, find it convenient to cultivate the term. But for us here in Guyana, we believe that there are important contributions Walter made to the political discourse in the country. And we believe it is important to keep cultivating those ideas. For example, I think he really introduced the question, of the self-emancipation of the working people, which is a very important concept, So yes, there are a number of philosophical things and political practice. For instance, I think one of the important aspects of Walter's practical politics, and this is the area in which he gets a lot of criticism by some political persons and some academic persons, because Walter believed that a leader must not be an armchair general. And he really believed that theory and practice must go together. And that the role of the revolutionary leader is to participate fully in every area of revolutionary activity. And people criticize him for going and collecting, the walkie-talkie from Gregory Smith. I think CLR James said that that kind of job is for, not for the generals. No, it comes contrary to Rodney. Rodney believed that any task the general asks a soldier to do, the general must be able to do it. And I think that is an important philosophical position of Walter that have international ramifications and a lot of international discourse. And I think, if watch Fidel Castro, if Fidel didn't pick up the weapon himself and go into the bush, Cuba will not be liberated. We got Mao Zedong, we got Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, and so it is a tradition that there are some schools taught, especially in the English-speaking Caribbean, where we get briefcase independence, who believe that the revolutionary leaders must just deal with rhetoric and theory and instruct the underlings to do the work and not to put themselves at risk.
Mr. Trotman, I don't have to call you MP every time I speak to you, do I?
Certainly not.
You've heard various people. I think Dr. David Hines would say, I'm a Rodneyite. Mm-hmm. What, in your understanding, does it mean to be a Rodneyite?
Well, I believe, like Tacuma does, that it is important for us to really look at this so-called principle in relation to what Walter and the WPA had struggled for over time. And over time, the WPA has been in the forefront of the struggle in defense of the poor and the powerless. And I think that it's extremely important for us to understand what that really means. And that if it is that you're looking at what a Rodneyite is supposed to be, that Rodneyite person is supposed to be in the forefront of the struggle in defending the poor and the powerless, advocacy of women's rights, advocacy of children's rights, advocacy, as Tacuma said, of the liberation of workers. And if it is in that context that term is used, I understand that is what it means.
How well and how effective has the WPA been in executing those philosophies, those policies? And I think one you might have mentioned as well, Tacuma, was people's power, no dictator. How well have they done? Both of you.
I think it's very. It's really. I don't think we could give a sufficient answer right now in the short kind of exchange, because remember it's 30-something years, and you have to watch what the WP did and how it what it achieved over time. I think that people don't realize the WPA after Walter's death. Let us go after Walter's assassination. We were able to close on the country at least on 2 occasions. We were able to have a continuous period of demonstration and engagement with the government, against the government.
What were those 2 periods? Just for the benefit of the public.
The food, what I call it, the food crisis is one that came to mind, and the other issues I'm not too sure of it. But the party, to my mind, I've had a varying degrees of success at various periods. But I would say overall, the WP have been able to keep the Walter Rodney tradition alive in Guyana as it relates to principal political engagement in the interests of working people. The party have never compromised its principles for any personal benefits or benefits of its leadership, and we have stood and make political decisions based upon objective analysis. And I think that is important. I do believe that Guyana would have degenerated at a faster rate if the Working People's Alliance had folded up soon after Walter's death. I think our continuation and our engagement in the politics forced both the PPP and the PNC to limit their political behavior. And I think that the country as a whole benefit from the activities at the WPA. And I think that people, even to more recently, I think the APMU, which to me objectively was a necessity. In fact, we really needed to have all.
I was planning to get there later on the APNU and its relation, the WPA's relationship with that.
Okay. I just in passing, I think the country has needed all oppositional unity against the government, and I think that to the extent that we were able to get it up to the point of the APMU, it is as a result of the WPA applying the Rodneyite tradition, the WPA tradition of making political decisions based upon objective necessity and the interest of the country and the people.
There have been periods when the WPA, as you know, stood alone in relation to its defensive issues. And those periods are numerous, and too numerous to recall. But in actual fact, it is true that the WPA on occasions seemed to be the only force in the society which was concerned about the deterioration in the society.
Are you including there the civil society or any segment of civil society?
Yeah, because civil society has been found wanting on too many occasions. And so that I believe that when I speak to this issue, I speak based on the realities and not...
and generally rather than...
Yeah.
Now, did the WPA issue, usually in the past it used to issue a statement to mark the June the 13th Did they issue a statement this year?
No, we didn't. In
How
fact,
was-
we haven't, even last year. We didn't. We used to, in the early days, we used to do it, almost every year.
Yes.
Since then, we haven't been doing it. We do it, every now and then when we believe it's, important. It is an area where we get a lot of criticism from, and I don't know if we could defend it. But I think because remember it's 30 years, they have a whole generation of young people,
33 years.
33 years, who doesn't even know Rodney and so and so. And sometimes it's a little awkward how to introduce it to a new political audience, given the fact that we haven't been able to, keep Walter's, work and achievement, as prominent as it ought to be. And sometimes, there's a sentiment in the executive that, we look like if we're just trying to ride upon Walter. As you ride upon Walter. So sometimes, it does lead to us, okay, don't make it happen, annually. When it's a critical moment, we will do something. So.
Is it that Walter Rodney is no longer relevant?
Walter Rodney is as relevant today as he was 33 years ago.
But as Ogun is saying, the young people don't even know about him or what he represents.
And we have to take some criticism for that, because what we should have been doing, part of the work that we should have been doing, was keeping Walter constantly in focus, not only in the minds of persons who know him, but certainly in the generation who really don't know much about him or don't know anything at all about him. And I think it's a criticism that we can't escape taking.
Mine wasn't intended to be a criticism, was
No,
for you to elicit a fact. Now, by perhaps a strange irony, maybe the most intense publicity, and I dare say scrutiny, that Rodney has evoked recently revolved around the Oliver Tambo Award. Strong views were expressed by various sides, including by Professor Horace Grant, who is associated with the Walter Rodney commemoration movement. Campbell, sorry, thank you. Yet the WPA in Guyana was noticeably silent on this. Why?
Okay. I think the responsibility of the party is more complex than the responsibility of individuals. It is clear that the trust and the controversy around the award started externally.
Yes.
Okay, out to Guyana. We at home have to make some judgments which the comrades abroad don't have the burden to deal with. And we have to make some political judgments that will make sense in the context of the Guyana political reality. Now, I don't get the sense that the award has become, even though a lot of writers, basically overseas writers have been keep raising it, I don't think it has become a major issue among the ordinary people in Guyana. And I don't think the WPA feels that we are under any significant pressure from ordinary people to respond to the award. But we have to balance, what we do with our political responsibilities, and engagement at home. And to the extent that we believe that the intervention is not helpful in the liberation process that we have to conduct here, we don't believe we should allow ourselves to be drawn into something that at the end of the day, the decisions, is not ours to make, and we could hardly influence it. The award is a matter for the South African government, and I think that regardless of what we see or don't see, they're going to make that decision based upon the internal and international assessment of their own interests.
But, Mr. Trotman, you were just saying the WPA sometimes had to stand alone. Here it is, its leader is embroiled, or the death of its leader is embroiled in a serious international issue, one that has evinced the South African Broadcasting News, the ANC itself, making very strong statements in support of Dr. Rodney, against the award, and the party that he led, with which he's associated and inspired, remains silent.
Look, the position in relation to the WPA is that it has its convictions in relation to the events that led up to the assassination of Dr. Rodney. And we believe that the truth of this matter will only be revealed through the international inquiry that looks at all of their issues. We haven't, as a party, even though it is that as individuals, we will have positions in relation to the award. I think that what Tacuma has done just now is as near as possible outlined what the WPA's position is in relation to this matter. That we believe that that the award is something that has to be that will be determined not by events over here, but what happens in the minds of the South African leaders, and that for the time being, that we will continue to look at the situation. We continue to believe.
And remain silent?
No, we continue to believe that that Walter Rodney was assassinated.
Well,
we continue to believe that there are persons who were involved in that assassination. And we, at this particular juncture, have not taken a position one way or the other on the award.
in that case, if you continue to believe that, do you believe then, as the South African government says, and here again, this is a publication, and this was sent to me by one of the comrades from the WPA. The South African government says the late Burnham deserves the Gold Oliver Tambo Award for his dedication to the liberation of his country, Guyana, as well as the African continent. Do you support an award that has that kind of citation?
Okay, you asked the WP. I can give a personal response
Sure.
to element of it. I think where the South African government puts themselves in a difficulty is when they link the award. I haven't had the opportunity to look at the merits of the award historically, when they first launched it, whether they had an internal component attached to it. Some people say it was merely, external. But I think when they link it to the liberation of Guyana, they open the door for Guyanese controversy. But I must say that if you watch Guyana, if you were to take away the external intervention and the external engagement, there's little domestic, engagement of the issue. I don't sense that the Guyanese masses see the merits or dismerits of the award as a major political issue.
Well, I would have to disagree with you there, Mr. Ogunseye, because I think Walter Rodney is being re-assassinated by some of these articles and contributions in the national media.
Yeah, but we will fight that. That's separate. But I'm saying, you got to make a distinction between the polemics. I will engage in polemics with anybody who say Walter was not assassinated. But if you ask me to decide on whether Burnham deserved the award or not, to me, it is not an issue that affects me.
For the liberation of Guyana?
No, okay. No, on that score, it posed a lot of difficulties. But in the context,
for you.
But in the context of the Rodney family, at the last time we had a major activity here, I think it was the 25th anniversary, make the appeal to the country that we should use Rodney's death and inquiry, as a process of healing and reconciliation. Now, for me, you have to fashion your politics in the context of at that. That's what the family stated. I know the family have changed the position on that, but that is the context.
No, but you were giving your own personal opinion
yes,
just now.
that's what I'm saying I have to bear that in mind. That that the last major consensus both the party, the family had, that was made known to the country and the world, was that we should use the Walters assassination as a process of healing and reconciliation. Now, for me, that guides me how I would deal with something like the Burnham Award. Is an engagement on the Burnham Award, one way or the other, helps reconciliation, help healing.
But re-assassinating him a second time does not. And someone needs to come to his defense. And shouldn't it be the WPA? That's all my question is.
Yeah, but I'm saying we've come to his offense on the question of the assassination. But I don't think you have to come to Rodney's defense on the question of whether Burnham should get the Tacuma Award. I don't think so. I think but I think the South African government ultimately will have to make it, and to the extent that the South African government indicated a willingness to give the award, and then they get pressure internally by the young people in South Africa, the youths and Africa as a whole, and they have to reconsider, and ultimately they will make it based upon their understanding of the domestic and international situation.
Mr. Trotman?
We who lived in those days of the PNC excesses.
That we includes me, huh?
Well, cannot forget what took place. And I think that the problems, here again I'm speaking as an individual, the problems for all of us will be to link the award with the liberation of Guyana, because those times were extremely troubling times for all of us. And I don't believe that we can forget what took place. And in that context, I believe that a lot of Guyanese will have problems in relation to the award. Because if the award, I haven't seen the citation, but if it is that the award says that it has to do with the liberation of Guyana, people will ultimately feel that the citation doesn't reflect accurately what his position is. In terms of the attempts to re-assassinate Walter, we have sitting with us here today a person who was on at least 2 occasions since the Oliver Tambo Awards discussions have arisen, have actually spoken to the assassination and put into context what took place. And I want to say that when it is that he made his, Tacuma, when it is that he made his comments, there has been no response to them so far.
The response to the announcement by the PPP, or PPP government, sorry, of an international commission of inquiry. There are some people who have taken that very cynically and say PPP, there the PPP goes again playing politics. Do you see this as a serious attempt by the PPP to resolve this festering issue?
They will have to do more than just announce it. The PPP is masters at making grand announcement. Dr. Jagan had promised Shaka, Rodney's son, when he came and made the protest, that he's going to have an inquiry and so forth and so forth. And never a year happened. Since
1998.
No, I think that the government action is actually the right direction, even though it comes to, after 20 years of PPP's rule. I think that the PPP have always wanted to have the Rodney issue, to use it against the WPA, and particularly they felt it was a useful tool to keep the WPA and the PNC at each other's throat. I think that, and I think it worked for them for many years. I think they've probably reassessing the situation, that the fact that the WPA is already in an alliance, electoral alliance with the PNC, then that policy failed. They haven't been able to use the Rodney thing to push the WPA from making necessary political adjustments that they feel the country needs. And I think that probably they realize that they reach a point where they can't get anything more politically from it. And they're deciding now, well, okay, the next best thing is to have the inquiry and try to hope
to make another announcement, because that's all you have.
More than that. I think they're hoping that the dynamics of the inquiry, if there's an inquiry, could undermine the APMU unity.
and possibly the WPA.
And
A quick comment from you before I take an ad break, please.
Yeah, when I was in Parliament when the Prime Minister made this statement, and I sat down and I said to myself, what the hell is this? What does it really mean? And I said that in the context of the fact that in 2005, when the motion was passed, was moved to discuss, for an inquiry, that the PPP in itself abstained from voting. And I wondered what game this is at this particular point in time. I share the views that Tacuma has, and I really want to see terms of reference worked out. I want to see personnel identified, because for me, you will only be demonstrating that there's a real seriousness about this if it is that you bring on board the kind of a commission that will work towards getting to the truth of the matter.
Thanks. We'll have to have another program once the terms of reference and the personnel. For now, we'll take an ad break. Welcome back to Plain Talk as we discuss Rodney, the WPA, and politics in Guyana with Member of Parliament Desmond Trotman and WPA Executive Member and Founder, Mr. Tacuma Ogunseye. Let's move on. On November 28, 2011, the people of Guyana made a dramatic change in the governance of the country by, for the first time, having a parliament that was not controlled by the executive. You're part of that parliament, Mr. Trotman, so it's probably appropriate that I start with you. How effective has the parliament been able to use that mandate given by the people of Guyana?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the opposition, the majority in Parliament, has taken this mandate very seriously and have been trying their best to execute the mandate. We have been at pains to make sure that governance reflects how it is the people want to see it evolve. Unfortunately, the People's Progressive Party seems not to understand that they're in a new dispensation, and they are stymieing to a large extent the work that the majority has been attempting to do. And they believe, as far as we can see, that they resort to the courts will help them to stymie the work of the majority.
As a voter, rather than a WPA colleague of Mr. Trotman, how do you see the mandate having been executed for the benefit of Guyana?
Okay, firstly, I think we have to try to understand how the mandate came about. You see, I have always took the position that very little going to come with this so-called new dispensation because of the way in which the new dispensation came into being. You see, in politics, how things came into being determine what is potentially possible coming out of it. And you will remember that this new dispensation is not the express will of the people. This new dispensation came out of after the PPP did their political rigging of the elections and manipulation, that international, foreign, and domestic forces, came together to say, look, this is a nasty situation. You are trying to find some acceptable way, and a compromise was worked out, which in my mind is not the express will of the people. I personally believe the PPP lost the elections.
Lost what? Lost the plurality?
Yes, I personally believe that. Okay, but that's my subject.
Where's your evidence for that?
I mean, it would be a long story, so I don't know I could go into it, but that's my basically...
No, but a statement like that is quite astounding. It was declared by GCOM The opposition parties have agreed it, the international community, the observers have all agreed
Yeah,
it.
but they all agreed of it in a certain context. In a certain context. In the context of trying not to reveal the objective truth of the problem, but to find a political convenient way for the system to continue to function.
Why did the WPA and the PNC go along with that kind of arrangement that you're talking
You will
about?
have to ask the APMU leadership why they accept, an elections that's far from acceptable. They will have to answer that, And if you, and I think at some point in the evolution of the politics, it will become clear exactly what took place at elections. I could tell you, myself and Trotman was in South Rampfield, and the PPP sent their thugs to attempt to steal the elections. First, the Trotman, who was our election official, the Jukum sent instructions excluding him from going to the polling station to supervise, to overlook the process. And they sent thugs to take control of those booths, ballot boxes. And we had to stay outside there with the people in the community to defend those things. They don't even write police. Now, if this is in Georgetown, APMU South area, and the people were so brazen, you telling me in Enmore and in many other Indian areas where the APMU and the AFC, they don't have effective presence. You really telling me that the AP and the PPP is an angel? So I think there's political judgment have to be made. And I think that in the context of Guyana electoral history, these elections should have been the most non-controversial elections. They should be the purest elections. So whatever come out of the elections, we should have known it is the express will of the people, and we can live by it. I'm saying that those elections didn't come to the par, and the opposition should have rejected them politically, and to allow a dispensation comes out of the political rejection. Once you compromise, the PPP say, look, we got them. We even tried to thief the elections at the last moment if Vincent Alexander wasn't vigilant. And I'm saying that the PPP was very contemptuous of the opposition. And the PPP understood one thing politically, that the new dispensation, the way in which the opposition and commentators promote it, raised high expectations in the minds of the people. And the PPP was politically smart. Make sure that the way we deal with it, that by the end of this process, nobody who was optimistic that this new dispensation will lead to anything positive will
Mr. Trotman, you're part of the leadership council of the APNU, aren't you?
Yeah.
And the WPA has a number of representatives. How many representatives does it have on your leadership council?
We have 3 persons.
3. That's Dr. Hines. Wasn't Dr. Hines on the leadership council as well?
Yeah.
So
you have 4 persons.
4 persons. Why did you allow a situation that Mr. Ogunseye is revealing to happen on the people of Guyana? I'm assuming
you're asking me if this was discussed within the
yes,
within the APN.
Yes.
This wasn't discussed within the APN. That wasn't discussed within the APN, and so that the kind of discussion that should have gone into the election results, as far as I know, didn't take place.
But why didn't the WPA representatives on the APNU Leadership Council raise this matter?
I could say this. The WPA instructed our people, to take a very hard position on the elections, to get the purest of processes, before we accept the results. But remember, at the end of the day, the WPA have limited influence within the APA.
No. But what Mr. Trotman is saying, they didn't even take it to the council.
No,
That's what he just said.
I'm not saying so. I'm not saying that we didn't take it. We took our positions to the council.
About the elections being rigged, according to Mr. Ogunseye?
No, we discussed the possibilities of the election results not being rigged. We discussed that. And WPA will have argued its positions very forcibly. But the fact of the matter is...
Possibility meaning after the elections? You discussed this after the elections?
And the elections will have taken place on November 28th.
Yes.
And there were a couple of days in which there were some discussions taking place. I wasn't privy to all of those discussions. Because the leadership of the AFC, of the APNU, wasn't meeting to discuss what was taking place. There would have been a smaller group of persons meeting to discuss that, but the broad leadership of the APNU was not meeting to discuss.
Do you think that's a weak, in your view? Have your representatives on the APNU Leadership Council failed the WPA in not following what you said? You had a strong
But Chris,
position. No, I'm asking.
Because you're assuming, you say you're making a statement on the assumption that the WPA representatives did not follow the instructions.
Well, you said you discussed the possibility of it not being rigged, Mr. Trotman.
What I'm saying is that there was a discussion about the possibility of the elections being rigged. But all of the discussions around that issue didn't take place, at least not in my presence.
Okay.
At least not in my presence.
All right. Let's move on. You were saying, Mr. Ogunseye, that the new dispensation hasn't become a reality. I want to ask in certain specific areas: constitutional change, governance, control of state resources, dictatorship over governance. How have we performed? Generally, I'm not just holding you, Mr. Trotman, responsible, or the APNU or the WPA. How have we performed in terms of bringing about these constitutional changes?
I think to be objective, and to be fair, given the kind of parliamentary system we have, I think I would say the opposition collectively, I would give them, if you don't like the grading thing, I would give them a pass mark. I won't give them, I won't give them a failure mark. I give them a pass mark. But they're the board of failure, because.
But how have we done in terms of constitutional change? Anything?
Nothing significant. Nothing significant. That is really, game changer in terms of governance.
What would they, Mr. Trotman, what would the WPA have liked to see in terms of constitutional change?
Well, the WPA was very strong in the discussions that led to the formation of the APNU, that a number of things should take place, but most importantly, that the election results should see a government of national unity being established. We were very, very concerned about that. And so that our expectation would have been that the results, particularly with the accepted results, that we will have had the kind of unity government that can take the country forward.
But the Constitution doesn't provide for that. So shouldn't you try to bring about a constitutional change to give effect to that?
Obviously, we should work towards that. And it has always been uppermost in the minds of the WPA to promote within the APNU, and that is what we've been doing, the importance of bringing about the kind of constitutional changes that will see, what is it we want to see take place.
What, and I'm trying to be specific here rather than just broad objectives, what specific proposals does the WPA have in terms of constitutional change at the level of the APNU Governance Council or Leadership Council? What specific proposals you have at the moment?
We want to see within the Constitution, we want to see...
No, I'm not. Those are objectives. I'm asking you what specific proposals you have on the table now.
At this point in time, there has been no specific proposals set before the APNU leadership for that discussion, because within the APNU leadership, those discussions have not taken place.
How fundamental do you see that to be, to get specific proposals on the table, to get them out there for the people to discuss with the person and say, look, this is what we're asking in the interest of promoting the development of our country.
No, I think that it is necessary to get some concrete proposals. But I think what's more important is to win the political environment that you make when you make these proposals, give it a reasonable chance to succeed. And I think there's where the APMU having some difficulties. I guess I can't speak with other opposition parties. I think in the APMU mind, is that we could come with concrete proposals, but if we haven't created a political environment for them to succeed, what's the point? Because
you see that as a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yes, but you see, you also got about the history of the country. I don't think there will be significantly new proposals that will come out in a concrete way that haven't been expressed before in Guyana on the top question of governance. The big failure is to create a political environment. You see, as I said,
when you say you also have got to put the proposals on the table.
Yes, I agree. I said do, but I'm saying, for me, we have to create more important than the proposals is creating an environment that will make those proposals stand a chance to succeed. Now, I'm a political pragmatist. Now, I can live with an electoral compromise with the PNC, given the fact, or the PPP, given the fact of the PNC and the African Guyanese, they do things in my name. They rig elections in the past. I think the PNC is under pressure. How to even PPP rig elections to the PNC under pressure. How to behave. But I can live with a political compromise on rig elections if it leads to real change in the country. Because
what would you tell me that compromise? Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm deviating a bit. What's the political compromise over rigged elections?
Okay, I think the PNC, given its own history in elections, which the PNC have never been able to deal with, satisfactory. I think there's two issues of PNC historically, even though they try, they haven't satisfactory, is the Walter assassination and rigged elections. And I think when the PPP use both things against them in terms of elections, the PPP will argue that our elections, even though you may say it's flawed, even though you may say it's rigged, it is of a higher standard than yours. So the PNC is under political pressure, how to deal with it, given the history. Now, I could understand the PNC leadership saying, well, look, we were bad guys too. We do things, the wrong way, and they're doing the back to me. Okay, but let me break even now. Let me break even and say, well, look, all right, here. We reach a point now where we can live with a reasonable compromise. Okay? I can live with that because I'm a political pragmatist. But the compromise must reflect, if the PPP, after these elections, have really accepted the new dispensation and really, try to make it work. As much as I'm critical of the APMU handling the election results, I would say it's a political plus. If out of the compromise, the PPP have responded in a nationalistic, in a principle way, say, look, boys, we got to try and make this thing work and make a genuine effort to move the country forward. I would say the compromise is worth it.
Mr. Trotman, so we haven't had any serious movement in constitutional change. What about the financial administration, governance issues, control of state resources, the state media, etc.? How well, what improvements has the new dispensation brought about?
Very little. Even though we've been attempting, you know, Chris, that we have been attempting to through acts of parliament to guide or to put in place mechanisms for improving the whole governance apparatus of financial transactions, etc. But the fact of the matter is, when it is that you have a president who decides that decisions of parliament, of the National Assembly, are to be ignored by him, is an indication of the difficulties that we're faced with. Is an indication of the difficulties we're faced with. So that when I said that we are attempting, the majority is attempting to ensure that the wishes of the people are adhered to, and also taking into consideration the fact that we have a president in this country who's acting like a general secretary of a party rather than president of the country, and who's prepared to help to work to frustrate the wishes of the National Assembly by not giving sanction to decisions that come from the National Assembly.
But in that case, and you're a political pragmatist you describe yourself as, how should an APNU, how should a WPA be saying to the APNU, we must respond to this if we believe that there is in fact a dictatorship by a minority? How should it be done?
I think the APMU must realize now that you're not going to achieve anything significant on the PPP unless you have struggle outside the parliament. It must be total engagement. PPP is hardcore political people. They know if you keep to the political engagement in the parliament, they like that because they still have a lot of scope for maneuver. But the APMU and the collective opposition have now to bring the people into the political process in a real way and start to muster thousands of people on the road to begin to change the political engagement. It's only then the PPP going to look at you, because see what the PP is doing. The PP planners are convinced that they are able to cut the sharp edge of the expectations that the new dispensation have built up among the APNU and opposition constituency. The masses of the constituency now is of the belief that this thing is making much sense. People like that. And that really, the people is reading that, look, the longer we could keep that, it means that their ability to mobilize the masses become more difficult for them. I think the opposition have to recognize that and begin to muster the people on the road to make a counter, to bring counter pressure. You see, the PPP have been using very ruthlessly all the advantage they have constitutionally and through the executive. They have been using it, very blatant and thing, but the opposition have an important, trump card, which is to bring the masses in the streets with the opposition up to date, have not thrown into the equation. And the longer they take to do that, the more brazen the PPP will get.
But I want to add something to what Tacuma said.
Well, I'm going to ask you to respond to it, and whether he has discussed it with you, whether you feel that that's an approach that the WPA should in fact be pursuing.
But I don't believe that this is only a position for the WPA itself, by itself, or the APNU as entities, organizations. I believe that all of us who are in Parliament, all of us who are concerned about what is taking place in relation to government's response, the PPP's response to decisions of the National Assembly, should be prepared to demonstrate that they are not accepting this situation, that we're in a new dispensation and that the wishes of the people must be adhered to. Chris, I want to make it very clear. I am one of the persons who believe that we must use, that the people have a power at their disposal, and that they must use it effectively. I believe so. And I am one of the persons who, every opportunity I get, I am going to be agitating for the use of people's power in order to combat the aggressiveness of the PPP in relation to putting in place, in relation to its opposition, to putting in place mechanisms for a new governance, a new type of arrangement.
Well, we started this program by discussing Walter Rodney and his willingness as a political activist to take that lead. Shouldn't the APNU and its leadership be providing that kind of leadership and direction, if you think that that is what is necessary?
APNU, I agree that APNU and its leadership should be taking the lead. But you got to understand that once it is in this country, mixed signals are being sent. Once it is that there are people who are saying that they don't believe in protest actions, and those people are represented in the opposition, well, then you understand the difficulty.
Who are you thinking of there?
The AFC has from time to time not been very forthright in relation to people protesting.
But
and once those signals continue to be made, it is going to be extremely difficult for you to mobilize people in the way which you should.
Well, I think it's also true that the AFC has shown some willingness. That was a position indeed. It might still be their core belief, but they have shown some willingness to go out of that. But the point is this, though, Mr. Trotman, and we get back to the Rodneyite principle that you must believe and you must have conviction. and if you and act on those convictions.
No, but just saying, that is good for WPA, but we can't transform the Rodney
into the APNU.
No. Well, but that could also be a cop out. That can be a cop out.
No, but you got to ask what is the WPA's position in the APNU in relation to a lot of.
Okay, well, tell me.
And I can tell you.
Okay, you've asked the question.
I can tell you what the WPA is. WPA has been very aggressive in relation to what should take place to counter the PNC's, the PPP's behavior.
And what kind of response you get from the other side in the APNU?
I'm not saying that there hasn't been there's no reception to that. I'm not saying so, but I think that.
But the public is not saying much of it.
You're talking about people with different cultures, and the WPA has a culture of its own that I think that you could even argue that is unique.
But let us not suggest, if I may, let us not suggest that the PNC has not had a culture of mobilization and protest.
Fantastic. They have the ability to do it.
Because we're running out of time, we keep talking about Parliament. But doesn't Parliament also have an ultimate sanction and saying, look, if you're not going to act on motions of this National Assembly, if you're not going to act on bills passed by this National Assembly, we will have to exercise 106 of the Constitution and say, look, you can't remain there. We got to go back to fresh elections. Isn't that your sanction?
I know for a fact that the APNU is exploring exploring some avenues on where to go from here. Because the APNU, I can say this, that the APNU does not accept that the president is acting as he should. And that the APNU, as I said, is exploring ways and means of thing. 106, of course. 106, of course, is an option and may very well be pursued at some point in time.
Sooner rather than later?
Well, I'm not sure. I can't say whether it's going to be sooner rather than later.
Would you support that type of action? Since they seem to want to stay in Parliament, this emphasis on parliamentary activity, is not one of the functions of Parliament?
It's one of the functions of Parliament, but I'm saying elections have not resolved anything in Guyana. And not elections significantly.
So what do we do?
I'm thinking that we have to, on the question of constitution and shared governance, mobilize the country for a fundamental shift in governance and win it outside the electoral process. So we're going to elections, a new legal constitutional arrangement.
Every time election comes around, we got to be very fast in this. We hear, we should have campaign financing legislation. We should reform GCOM. What, again, have we done about those two major issues?
Nothing.
Mr. Trotman?
In terms of campaign financing, nothing. There's an attempt right now to reform GCOM, starting with the identification of somebody, a new person as chief elections officer.
That doesn't reform the organization.
No,
that replaces one office by another.
But discussions. But that's important. But discussions are taking place.
But that's not reform.
Discussions are taking place within the APNU on the proposal that we're going to make in terms of reforming the Elections Commission.
The question: do a statement of fact? Political parties are not regulated in Ghana. They are legal non-entities, to use a famous phrase. Should political parties remain unregulated in Ghana? And again, what should we be doing about it? Quickly.
Okay. I don't know. I think that is something that we have to spend more time on, because the way political parties are critical to give the masses participation. And I would not want to support a process which allowed political parties only could be built by the elites in the country, and doesn't allow.
I'm asking a broad question. We can to address. Yes, you could put mechanisms, so democracy and so on inherent in it. But should they as a cooperative society, as a friendly society, as a burial society be regulated? Shouldn't political parties be regulated as well?
I will want to see what you mean by regulation. You know, I regulated. I'm not too sure I understand.
That they must have proper accountability, that they must have proper democracy, internal democracy.
Yeah, of course, if that's what I mean. But if you know,
That's what I mean.
But Chris, we have to be very careful in terms of regulating, because Tacuma is right. If it is that you take the way in which co-op societies are being regulated, one has to be very concerned that when you move to regulate political
Okay, let me put the question the other way. Do you believe political parties should remain unregulated?
I haven't given that a thought.
Finally, we've had lots of talk about money laundering. Should political parties be made subject to the Money Laundering Act as well?
I would say yes.
I agree with you.
We have, after an hour, come to unanimity of consensus. Mr. Desmond Trotman, Mr. Raphael, Tacuma Ogunseye, thank you very much for appearing on Plain Talk this evening. Operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. See you next week.